Hey everyone, welcome to Taqueando. I'm your host, Bill Esparza. And this week on the podcast, I have the honor and privilege of having both chief restaurant critics for the New York Times, Ligaya Mishan and Tejal with me. And we are going to be discussing nerdy journalistic stuff and hopefully some questions they haven't been asked because I've watched so many of their interviews. But first, at Taqueando, eating antojitos is a way of life from the world's most celebrated dining rooms to the gritty stands and storied market stalls that preserve culture. Life is short, so we must eat well. So here are this week's antojitos rundown. It was a busy week, and I'm super excited to get into this conversation with chief restaurant critics of New York Times, Tejal Rao and Ligaya Mishan. But I did manage to get away for a little bite in Tijuana. It was my birthday, so happy birthday to me. And I've been traveling so much the last 3 months that I finally got a free weekend to take care of some stuff. My dog sees a vet in Tijuana, and so I had to take my dog down for some checkups and some things that I just haven't been able to do. It's tough being a doggy daddy and traveling so much. So I did treat myself to a wonderful dinner at La Carmelita Molino in Tijuana. I don't know if you guys have heard of this place, but it's in my Eater guide, the Eater Tijuana guide. By the way, chef friends who are listening that keep asking me about my secret spots in Tijuana, you got to read my Eater guide first, at least. Come on, give me a click, look through. There's places if I were to take you to Tijuana, I would pick places from that list. So use my list, right? So La Carmelita's on there. Chef Joe. La Carmelita has a bib gourmand, and it's again also it was on my eater list before that. I think so. And it's a wonderful restaurant. I've only gone for brunch or their breakfast on weekends, which is amazing. Okay, so I'd never done the dinner, and I had gone to the vet. I checked into the hotel, dog friendly hotel in Tijuana. Hotel Ibis takes dogs, and it's right across the street from Taqueria El Franc and also Tijuanazo there in Tijuana. And so you can, take a quick trip to grab some tacos. So I went for dinner. I went late, and it's the first time I've ever been to La Carmelita there where there wasn't a line out the door, because I usually do go for the brunch, which is super popular. But one of the servers said she really loved the dinner menu more in it because of its personality and touches and very specific dishes. So I went ahead and ordered big for myself because it was my birthday. I turned 57. And I ordered the taco de jaiba, which is a soft shell crab taco, deep fried soft shell crab with beans on a flour tortilla with salsas. Amazing taco that's also in that tradition of Tijuana where you have all these wonderful seafood tacos, right? Ensenada's the fish taco capital of tacos de pescado, capeados. That is the capital. But Tijuana has all the other seafood tacos and an amazing range of tacos that are amazing. And so La Carmelita did an amazing taco. And then I was also recommended, I was trying to figure out which tostada. And on Instagram stories, I've been going off lately about tostadas here in Los Angeles. You young Mexican American chefs need to make sure that you fill the tostada all the way to the edge, that you have a base, and also you non-Latin American, non-Mexican Central American chefs that are trying to do tostadas on your tasting menu that are not even tostadas. You have to put some fat there to make the tostada stick to the topping. Okay, that's the way we've always done it in Mexico. If you get a tostada de pata, it has refried beans on the bottom, like a real soupy refried beans. And if you do tostada of mariscos, it always has a pate or mayonnaise or an aioli. It can be also guacamole on the bottom, but you have to have something that kind of brings the tostada into that topping. And so I ordered their yellowtail, their tostadona de jurel, which is like a giant tostada. If you saw my story, chefs, that's the way you do it. There was a pate on there, and a smoked fish pate that they do in house, and topped with lovely marinated yellowtail and a little salad on top. And of course, I put some salsa on there. every bite should be uniform too. Don't do these tostadas where you have one side, you have some ingredients on one side and on the other, or and you have all those naked tostada spots, those patches where there's nothing on there, or you do it like a damn canopy. It's not a canopy, it's a tostada. So fill it up, okay? And do it right. But La Carmelita, amazing tostada. And then for my main, I ordered their pulpo zarandeado, which is a barbecued octopus with some over some beans, what they call it a black bean hummus, and another amazing dish. Do get the clamato verde. That goes well with the tostada and any seafood thing you're going to have. But it's an incredible clamato and a green clamato, and it has and order it with an oyster on top. So I had an oyster on top of my clamato to go with these wonderful dishes. I do recommend, highly recommend. Oh shit, that's the Michelin guy. That's what they say, right? Highly recommended or recommended restaurants. Bib Gourmand. La Carmelita for dinner is next level. It's a wonderful dinner in Tijuana. Amazing cuisine. Chef Joe kills it in the morning, afternoon, at night. Go anytime. And that's it. Before we speak with Tejal and Ligaya, I'm so excited about that, by the way. I'm going to say it now and again. A reminder that Taqueando is part of the Acquired Taste Media family. Be sure to listen to our sister podcast, the LA Food Podcast. This week, the guys are celebrating their 150th episode with their first ever Q&A. You can submit your questions by shooting Luca a DM at the LA Countdown. That drops on Friday. And now, without further ado, vamos a taquear. First, I have to say, both of you, Ligaya and Tejal, thank you so much for being here. I'm a reader and a follower, supporter. It's amazing to have you here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, Bill.
And I've had the pleasure of dining with Tejal several times. So next time you're in town, we have to meet up.
I would love it.
It doesn't have to be a taco crawl, right?
I mean, I would love a taco crawl, actually. You guys could both school me a little.
Okay, then a taco crawl it is. A taco crawl it is. So, I feel there's really been a big change with both of you now becoming it's so exciting on so many levels, I think for all of us. And for me, I'll speak for myself. It's very exciting for me that you're sort of I'm not talking about generations of ages, but like you started around the same time I did. And a lot of writers that are writing now kind of came out of this era of the beginning of digital media, 2012, both of you, Tejal at the Village Voice, and you with your column in New York Times, Ligaya, and both of you now, arriving at the same time at New York Times, that there's this huge change going on. My question is, I do feel like there's a changing of the guard for this current generation of food writers. Tejal, I know personally that you've made yourself very accessible here in Los Angeles with monthly meetups for writers. And I feel like I would have never thought that would happen from a New York Times food critic. So, how are both of you changing the culture of what it means to be a food critic?
Wow, that makes it sound amazing what we're doing. It's such a nice framing of it.
I I don't know exactly. I mean, I'm like, is it too soon to say how we're changing the culture? It's funny. I wouldn't have thought of the meetups if you hadn't mentioned them. But I do think like I'm longing for a sense of community and connection with other people who work, with other journalists and with. It's difficult work, and I think it can be lonely. And each publication has its own like code and culture, and it feels so good when we all kind of when we do have time to hang out and not just gossip but just like become friends. It feels really important,
Yeah.
especially as the landscape is kind of changing so quickly and drastically.
I really value the thoughts of people. I feel very lucky just that there are so many great people out there thinking deeply about food, and that thinking helps me think more deeply and brings more to my own work. So I definitely feel like I love that this is just one big conversation.
Hmm. And I like the idea of like thinking of criticism as being that, right? Like being a big conversation instead of being weird hierarchy of power.
Yeah, or they were isolated in some eyrie
Hmm.
somewhere.
Hmm.
Which touches on the way it felt before. As a, I'm a freelancer, and I feel like I'm probably going to be a freelancer for life. And I started in 2011 at LA Times, and seeing that coming in, especially as, one of the rare Mexican Americans to sort of enter that space at the time anyways, in 2011, that it wasn't a welcoming place, and I felt so distant from, the critics that we looked up to, the people that we read. We had people here in Los Angeles, like, Jonathan Gold was here, Besha Rodell was here. We had Irene Verbilla, at the time when I was starting to write, but they just weren't the kind of people that would gather writers or reach out or really speak to writers on an equal level as peers, and like you said, have this kind of conversation. So it does feel a little revolutionary.
Yeah, I'm glad that it feels that way. I That seems like a beautiful thing. I
Oh,
maybe, I mean, I've been a freelancer. I was a freelancer all the way up to becoming a critic, actually. This is the first time I'm on staff at the New York Times.
I was just going to say I had a similar kind of an informal meetup when I was in New York. And I think I started it when I was freelancing with Portia Wilson, but now I can't remember if I was freelancing or not, because her and I were just kind of hanging out one day and feeling a little like we wanted to connect with, with other people who did what we did. And we were feeling a little isolated from them and lonely. And I don't know, it just seems like it seems like, writers work, it can be collaborative, but so much of writing you do by yourself, it can feel lonely. You know, I think it feels so normal to like want to connect.
Well, it was fun. I mean, I was such a fan of Tejal's when she was writing for the back when she was writing for the Village Voice, and so I remember reaching out to you, and it was really fun for us to go out to eat.
I could not believe you got in. Like, I remember being so excited to hear from you because I was such a fan of yours.
So yeah, so we fangirled over each other, and then here we are. So it's funny to look all the way back.
no, it's an amazing trajectory. The both of you arrive, again, your paths. It feels like a positive thing right now because there's a lot of people that are, there's publications closing, and sometimes when I'm around younger writers, there's this kind of air of despair, because they're not finding work. But I feel like restaurant criticism is very strong right now, and got, a lot stronger with the two of you showing up, and right now, with Tejal here in Los Angeles, and Bill Addison here, it's not any different than it was a decade ago when we only had a small group of very excellent critics.
It is an exciting time.
The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I sort of mentioned this to Tejal. So the other thing that's happened, I think, when I look back at, again, we have this reverence for our, as we should, for food critics of the past, the ones we talk about all the time, Craig Claiborne and Ruth Reichel and Jonathan Gold. Jonathan Gold became more than a critic here. He became sort of an icon here in Los Angeles. And of course, all the New York Times, over the years, the various New York Times chief restaurant critics, is that what you're having to do right now is so much more intense. And some of them dabbled in, international cuisines and the range of cuisines, but you're really going full in compared to what they had to do. And I remember when I was at LA Times, like, there was just no talk. There wasn't any coverage inside these different communities. Jonathan Gold did some, and people talk about that a lot. But when you look at the overall coverage at the LA Times, it was very limited. And so my little story I wanted to tell you is that I got to go on a date. I'm going to call it a date. It was just dinner with Gail
Oh,
Green.
wow.
Yeah. So we'd worked on a show together, one of these Top Chef things, and I offered to take her out for Mexican cuisine. Now, she had just been on some show where Rick Bayless had won the show on a mole dish. It was when Rick Bayless was competing on like Top Chef Masters. And so he had won, and she was one of the judges. And I took her to this restaurant, and we had mole, right? It was some Mexican restaurant. And after the dinner, she said, the Rick Bayless's mole was the first time I ever had mole in my
Oh,
life. And I was sort of like, oh
Wow.
my gosh. That's crazy because, this is Miguel Green and her. I mean, she was older and she'd been around a long time. And that just fascinated me that she could spend all that time as a food critic and not even have tasted Mexico's most famous dish. And that she was, you know, talking about it on a television show. And so I feel like that generation of critics did not have the challenges you have. And so I really want to know how you're managing that. How do you, I know Tejal just wrote about Frontera, Tacos Frontera, and
Hmm.
and also writing about Spago, and you did this thing on Alinea, and then you're doing, you're really all over the place. How do you do that as a writer? Balance all those cuisines and all those demands that your predecessors did not have to put up with.
I think that, I mean, that Gail Green story is really wild, but I do think, a lot of, I don't think like we're the first critics to do that. I think a lot of critics have done that, have done versions of this work, and I don't want to erase that. I feel like I'm just always learning and researching and trying to, because I do think I'm not, I'm not an, I don't have deep expertise on everything, right? And so I have to be honest about that, and I have to put in the work of eating and reading and researching and learning constantly. I do often find myself, and even it'll happen with something that I think is really familiar to me, or I think that, oh, I'm so comfortable with this, I know this so well, and then something will happen, or I'll I'll realize there's this missing component, and I actually have to do more research again. It kind of never ends, which is
Yeah.
what's great. It's like what's kind of fun about the work often, even though it's stressful.
Yeah, that definitely is what makes it worth it.
Yeah, so Ligaya, to sort of reframe that. Yeah, I think I do think there were definitely critics before, and here in LA we had Barbara Hansen at the LA Times, who to me is the pioneer of that kind of coverage, and she would talk about Oaxacan restaurants a lot. And Jonathan Gold
Yeah.
had said that he followed her lead in that, and then he did his thing. But like, when I look at the coverage, if I look at the coverage, say in 2012 or 2005 or the 90s, the papers were not really giving you the opportunity to talk about these things as much. So maybe Ligaya, you could also respond to this question, given that angle.
I'm so lucky because I was able to start writing restaurant reviews like from the very beginning. I was going to the smaller places, the immigrant run places. This focus on what you might say, places that were just holes in the wall or street carts, or what back in the day they always thought of as the cheap eats, and that's not a phrase we'd ever use now, because that makes it sound like it's lesser in some way. And of course, this is the most celebrated food. Although I also never forget that the very things that we sort of like, we value this food that is so accessible because it is less expensive. But to sustain that means that people can never really get ahead. When you think about that we love street food, but street food requires a class of people who can only who are just scraping by. Like, this is as much, there's a certain overhead that they're just like never going to get above. So I never forget that side of it too. So I think it's a really interesting thing. I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit
No, no,
here,
no.
but I feel like there's all these are all the different threads that go into when you're writing about lesser known cuisines, which at the beginning always, these cuisines were sort of confined to a certain kind of restaurant, right?
Yeah,
So you weren't doing fine dining, so you were able to cover these other cuisines. And now that's changed because so many of these cuisines have now entered into this higher end realm and have become mainstream. I mean, that's a very exciting thing that's happened in the past few decades. And that has also changed the way we write about them. And the difference between a cuisine that's someone who's cooking and trying to present them in a, what might be, for lack of a better word, a more traditional way, versus someone who is taking this cuisine that's not a Western cuisine, but trying to do something new with it, that incorporates perhaps some Western techniques, but isn't fusion in that old way
Right.
of things. I mean, there's so many words that we used when I was starting out, and the way we talked about this kind of food, that it was exotic or cheap. Like these were the words that were
Ethnic.
associated, and
Ethnic.
now we've been able to ethnic. Everything is ethnic, right? So now I do feel that's been the great arc of this, at least my experience, given that I started writing restaurant reviews in 2007, and so I feel like I've learned so much in this process of both learning how to talk about these foods, having to do lots of research and study, the way Tejal said, being an eternal student, having to learn even now all these cuisines. I've been really fortunate to write about them, but I still don't know enough. Every time it's having to go deeper, um, which is part of the fun, but also the challenge of it.
Right, and then they're in motion too, like they're changing, like these cuisines are changing and
Absolutely.
growing in real time too, which is really
Mhm.
like that's also very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the three of us are arriving at this time where we saw the transition from European, Eurocentric cuisines, French, Italian food, kind of give way to contemporary Asian and Latin American cuisines and chefs, and even more micro regions, right? And since we all started writing, we were sort of going through that phase, but now we're really here.
Mhm.
Does that also inform, the restaurants that you're choosing for reviews?
That's an interesting question. I think there is a lot of pressure that comes with a review from the New York Times. And maybe that's a little bit different from when I was writing my column that only focused on these smaller places, to now putting every restaurant we write about is put on a national stage. So yeah, I know that this is something Tejal and I have talked about, how when you choose a place, it has to be able to sort of bear up under a pretty big spotlight.
Sure.
So thinking about that, but still wanting to spotlight small places, not wanting everything to be on the higher end, even though lots of exciting things are happening on the higher end also. And so
Yeah.
those are all the kinds of calculations we have to make each time.
So both of you recently questioned the relevance in different ways. I'm saying that as a reader of two institutions, Spago, a California cuisine restaurant that made chefs matter, that's fallen a little flat, and Alinea, a modernist destination where you, Ligaya, suggested surrendering to the zaniness if you have the budget to indulge, that it's maybe an okay experience to have. So if you got money to burn, I think were the words. So as foodie culture grows in America and more pioneering restaurants age, is it your duty to call the time of death?
Oh my
Oh
God.
gosh.
Oh my God. Wow. I don't like the idea of being a destroyer. No, I think that's perfectly. I think that I think part of this. So this idea of service journalism, which is that the reader,
Sure.
we're thinking of the reader who is coming to this restaurant and spending their money. We also think about the chefs and the restaurateurs and all the people working at the restaurant and all the labor that's involved. But the reader's experience coming into this place, there is this question of is it worth it?
Yes.
And there are different restaurants for different moments and occasions. I'm not saying there's only one kind of restaurant, but I do think,
Right.
there's a difference if you're spending $435 a person for a meal and you're not in the food business, the restaurant business, or the food writing side. You just have something different at stake. And so I think we're writing for that person who is not an insider, who's not just going to go because they want to necessarily have this, all the things that motivate us within the food world, because we're curious about things, and if it doesn't work, that's okay, because we're always going out to eat. We live these lives that ordinary readers don't have. We're
Yeah.
eating out all the time. We
Sure.
have a completely different sense of restaurants.
Yeah. I was thinking about that exactly. Like I was thinking about that with Spago. Should, thinking about someone who maybe they've watched a documentary about Wolfgang Puck and they're
Sure.
so excited to go to Spa. I wasn't thinking about the regulars who go there every Wednesday
Right.
who are very happy with whatever experience it is they're having. I was thinking about maybe like my dad taking the family out to dinner to this very special place that is meaningful, that has a history, and that means something in Los Angeles for a really special meal. And then the disappointment that might come with that because the reputation of the place and the experience don't match up. And the bigger and more powerful the institution, the more disappointing that gap is.
Yeah. No, I think that people, well, I think I understand that. I think most readers understand that you're talking to the crowd that's maybe going to go there for the first time, or maybe went a long time ago, because when Spago made the move from Hollywood to Beverly Hills, it's crowd aged with the restaurant. I feel like the diners that
Mm-hmm.
still go there are older, and it's obviously they've they've made some money, and that's just a regular restaurant, a neighborhood restaurant for them somewhat.
Although I was surprised to see some younger people. There
Really?
were younger diners in there too. Yeah, there were diners that were actually looked so young. I couldn't tell if they were on their own. I couldn't tell if they were in high school or in college.
Oh, wow.
And I asked the server. I asked this. The servers are wonderful. I asked the server, and he said that they had ordered cocktails and they had been carded, and they were indeed in college.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that was, I went many times, but yeah, there are younger people there. Surprisingly, I think that they're people who kind of were ushered in, the children of
That's
regulars
right.
who themselves think of it as a special occasion place, or went for graduation and now it's become a special occasion place. Although I'm just guessing
No, I
with
think
that.
that's a fair guess. I think what we're seeing right now, from my point of view, is that because of the growth of, I'm going to use the word foodie, whatever, foodie culture in America, and how chefs have become so popular, and food television, all these things. So now there's all this pressure for all these institutions to keep going, and I feel like we don't have lots of restaurants that were in their heyday in the 60s here in America, or 70s, or even the 80s, Spago being one of the few. But now there's so many restaurants that are looking at it because they have a chef on television, they have a chef that's famous, that they need to go for 20, 30 years and go forever. So more and more of these places are around. I think when I think about French Laundry, it, as a food writer, as someone who is very interested in these experiences, I just don't have a reason to go. It would have been nice to have been there when Thomas Keller was in the kitchen and when it was in its heyday. But I also am looking at, like, do I want to spend $600 for a restaurant that's just a brand and not really doing something special? So what sort of separates? And I'm going to give my examples. Is what sort of separates a restaurant like Puyol, which I personally like the way they've changed over the years and the way they're sort of evolving, even though it's not, they have other CDCs that are developing menus and things, obviously working with Chef Enrique Olvera. But I really enjoy going there. And then there's other restaurants like Spago where I feel like it's very dated and it's just making money. And again, I don't know that that's the case. But for you, as a how does it translate to you when you're doing your research? You're going to talk about a place like Spago and Alinea. Where's that line between someone who's really evolving, doing something really special still after all these years, and someone who's just, cashing a check?
Wow. I think that definitely chefs can continue to make exciting food, and it's interesting to see the arc of these long careers.
Yeah,
And I think more that they can become trapped in their own success or fame, where certain things become expected and it might be harder to do something new. Which, when you look at restaurants like El Bulli or Noma, you can see that they did have these more limited lifespans, but then the chefs can go on to do other things.
sure.
I think about chefs. I think about restaurants that I loved that closed, and I think that there's one particular chef I always think about, and I said one day to somebody, so sad to me that she doesn't have a restaurant. And someone said, "Oh, I know her, and she's very happy not having a restaurant."
Right.
So it's interesting. I mean, there are different ways that you could
Sure.
fulfill that artistic impulse. For me, with Alinea, I still think Alinea has greatness in it. I think that there's clearly that incredible imagination and technical skill of the chef, and and it would be, I guess, my hope in writing that is that I think that there's still a way that that could come forth. I don't know what form that would take, and I don't mean to have all this hubris of, you know, let me say this is what I think. I have no idea what should be done, but
Yeah.
I guess what I want to say is I would love to see it. I mean, just as sort of
Yeah.
a fan from afar for so long,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to see all the things people saw when Alinea first opened. You know, I would have loved to have experienced that, and I don't see why that couldn't still be possible somehow in some other form.
Sure.
I was just this making me think of I also wrote about emeralds recently, and emeralds has been around. It's also part of a big, a bigger empire. It's been around. It opened in 1990,
Yes.
and I think the way that emeralds has grown and aged and changed is really interesting. It's not necessarily innovating, but it's doing something really special, and it's bringing a lot of energy into this kind of 90s style of fine dining format. It's like the version of the restaurant that Emeril Lagasse might have eventually run himself if he hadn't become a star on the Food Network. It's kind of like an alternate reality, and I think I thought it was really, really well
Right.
done.
Right. I think you were talking about has how his sons have taken over, or they're doing something a little different with it right now.
His son EJ took over. He's 22, and he's running, a really, really extraordinary kitchen with it's just a tasting menu. They don't do a la carte, and it's a lot of some of the classic dishes from Emerald's have been changed or shrunk. um, you know, but he's also kind of doing his own thing at the same time. But it does feel like re-examining this family legacy and bringing it into the moment in a way that a lot of restaurants struggle with that.
Yeah. And so you felt the real connection between the original Emeralds and what's going on now.
I experienced the original Emeralds as a kid.
I know you love New Orleans.
I don't have I didn't go as a critic, and I don't have it's not quite, but yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's a restaurant it cares about what the restaurant used to be, and it's also changing it at the same time, and that's a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. No, I mean, I think
Yeah.
there's places like that for me where it's always a great idea to go, and they do change and evolve, and they do it in a way that's still delicious and fun, and they're keeping the energy and the family's connected, or the chef is still connected in some kind of way. And and so talking about Ligaya, you were talking about service and serving the diners, and both of you were talking about it. I feel like that's changed so much, and so I really love, like I said, I love the way the restaurants you're choosing to review, and the variety of restaurants and the conversations you're having. Do you feel the diners are changing, and because of the the growth and breadth of this new foodie culture, that so many people are going out to eat, or interested in food? You are, I think, the two of you now are speaking to the broadest, most demanding, uber vocal audience in the history of food criticism. Do you sense that?
That's so interesting. Go ahead, Tejal.
I was going to say, I do think like the general reader, or maybe I assume a certain level of expertise in the general reader, that I don't have to explain everything, because
Yeah.
that there is this kind of base food knowledge in people now that I don't think that was there 10 or 15 years ago. And maybe I shouldn't assume that, but I do.
Yeah, I think that people are much more open to trying new things. So I think the good side is that people are excited and they want to learn more, and they're very open to trying cuisines they've never tried before. I think maybe the downside is that we live in this time of such social stratification, and I find it very strange to go to these extremely expensive restaurants that are packed. I part of me looks around and I think, how do all these people have this
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
crazy.
money? And and it makes me a little uneasy, to be honest. I mean, these aren't all spectacular restaurants; they're just very expensive ones, and I find that again and again with the reviews, because now we're trying to engage more with our readers in the comments, and often there's comments about how expensive these
Right.
restaurants are, even when the restaurants aren't that expensive within the scheme of things. When we're talking about a restaurant that I might think is actually a much more reasonable restaurant, and yet when and then when you write about the very expensive, but when you kind of enter the stratosphere, suddenly people come out and say, but that's worth it. And I thought, okay, this is so interesting. So a
Mm-hmm.
restaurant that I think is amazing within its category, right, where you might come out spending $50-$60 a person, somebody might say that's just too expensive because they have bottles on their wine list that are over $100. So that's crazy. How can they do that? And then you review a place that's $435 a head, and people say, "Oh, no, 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 but that's worth it." I'm looking at these places. We're looking at these places in different ways. We're looking if they're worth their price point. And just because something is that expensive and putting on a big show doesn't necessarily mean it's worth it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, so those are the two things that sort of seem like this particular moment.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I was talking to another critic, not a food critic, a different kind of critic the other day, and we were talking about how with food stories we get all these comments about how everything is
Right.
expensive, almost regardless of how much it costs. But people don't really leave those comments on stories about fashion or stories about other things we look at closely. It's really rare, even a story about like couture. It's very rare for someone to get 100 comments about how oh my gosh, it's so expensive. And I'm not I don't it's I agree with the guy, it's not always worth it, but it's really interesting how we think about food differently, and also expensive is really relative.
Yeah, right. It is relative. I mean, I think we've always been dealing, well, again, as more publications have been covering Latin American cuisines, different Asian cuisines, mom and pop places, small family restaurants, that the price thing has become more of an issue, because because before we weren't writing about these restaurants. But and now we're always having to try to, like, decode that for people and break that down, like why they should be paying for this dish and that dish, why it's expensive in this setting and cheap in that setting, or should be cheap. That's that I feel like that's what we're always doing.
Or should be more expensive,
Right.
should be, sometimes it's like
Yes.
it's expensive and it still should probably cost more,
Right.
Right.
No, I mean,
if it was going to cost what it actually cost.
yeah, and what people don't
I mean, groceries are expensive. Food is
food is
expensive. Like
expensive.
just buying food at the store is expensive right now.
It's crazy going to the
So
supermarket right now. Yeah, to me it's like a conversation I'm just not having with people. I'm like, okay, it's all expensive right now, guys. There's not really much can be done about that. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in the world, and so, which is actually another one of my questions. Food writing after Donald Trump, and Ligaya, I read an interview with you about the weight of writing about food, how you were told to stop writing about the food and focus on the people. And so, with Donald Trump, how has that changed how we view the politics of food in terms of, especially the communities that are being attacked, the different, especially specifically Mexican communities, Central American, Indigenous, Black, and Asian, so many Asian communities too, that are now under these pressures from the federal government. Does that also influence your food writing?
I mean, Tejal, you wrote about in your Takriya review.
Yeah, I wrote about ICE raids and how that's sort of affecting. I mean, in that case, it was a very immediate, a restaurant not able to open or not feeling like it was safe to open or not, like I don't think I don't think it's affecting like the writing itself, but I do think, like, if you look at food culture right now and all these things that are kind of percolating, that they're it's all these things are connected: trad wives and steakhouses, and these, there are certain kind of
Bromokases?
elements of food elements of food culture that are kind of, um
Yeah,
I don't know if they're I don't know if they're actually becoming more popular or if we're just seeing them, but there is like this moment, and then there's like the Maha movement. I mean, there's so much stuff that feels very interconnected,
right.
and I don't think it's possible for me to address it all in my writing in a review, but I do think everything's kind of colliding in the work, in the restaurants themselves, and in the work that we're doing. It's just kind of, it's in the culture.
Sure. Yeah, there's that. Not so much about the topics. I mean, yeah, about topics and politics, but also like with all
Yeah.
that going on. I can say this as a freelancer who's was originally sort of pushed into, oh, you're our Latin American guy, you're the Mexican guy, you're gonna write about these things. And I did have an editor at one point basically say, stay in your lane, when I wanted to pitch something else. But generally people have been very supportive and allowed me to do other things. But I sort of now, with Donald Trump, I feel obligated to like stay here and keep doing this and really think a lot about who I'm writing about and also start looking deeper. I started to, focus on indigenous cultures and even just regular taco trucks. Like, hey, is there anyone indigenous here? What communities are you from? How can I talk about that to make sure people are hearing about these people? That's not something that, obviously when you're a critic, when you're a chief critic for, New York Times, you have so many things about objectivity. I'm making that shit up, but but for me, I'm going to be a little biased in my coverage, and that bias to me is always a correction for what's going on out there in the world. And so I don't mind, oh, I found this great indigenous cook in doing this really wonderful thing. I'm going to just write about them instead of the press release that comes out about somebody that's appropriating cuisine. So I'm just wondering, are the choices being somewhat shaped by the politics around food right now?
So this question about bias. I feel like sometimes I don't know if it's bias, if it's just a point of view.
Yeah.
If you're telling stories that other people aren't telling, I don't think that's a bias. We're all, we're all seeking out stories, and part of what makes a newspaper,
Yeah.
great is that it is telling as many stories as possible. So I do think when I was writing A Hungry City, I did feel like the column really got a focus after the 2016 election, because it made me really think about, what am I doing here? I'm so often writing about these small restaurants run by immigrants
Yeah.
and telling their stories. And so, in a not overtly political way, just trying to learn more about each of these, everybody who was, trying to make a go of it. This is part of what makes New York City, New York City, that there are so many people from around the world who are just making it work, like
Yeah.
with really difficult lives. And just, I saw it as celebratory in that way. And hopefully, the more of these stories are told, the more they become part of the landscape of the information that people are absorbing, so that they just come to think, oh yes, I know about this more. This is part of my world. These people are part of my world. This food is part of my world. It's not something exotic. It is something that's completely ordinary to millions of people on the other side of the world, and I want to learn about it too. I think that it's too easy to say food is something that unites us. But
Oh, that's so
I do
dumb.
think of it more as a Trojan. I think of it more as a Trojan horse, right? You're like, here's
Yeah.
here's this delicious taco. Oh, come learn. Now you'll perhaps learn more.
I
We're
think it
going to
unites
also
us
it's
three.
No, I
Yeah,
think that's
it
so right. Like pleasure, the pleasure of food is sort of the way in, and then when you have the
yes,
reader's attention, you get to do all of these other things, or
that's
right.
the
show
hope.
them all of these other things. Yeah.
I think that's the hope,
No,
and I think that we can still do this, even with the weight of the national spotlight.
yeah,
There is still a way to tell all of these stories, but I also think in the way that we tell the more mainstream stories, we are bringing the same approach, right?
right.
Just if there's just an anthropological sense of, this thing that seems like something we all take for granted, that this is just the mainstream, this is the way it is. Actually, let's look deeper. What is going on here? Let's think more deeply about who these people are as well, so that we can understand that that's the way we're supposed to think about everybody, and how we approach all food. So that's the hope.
Yeah, I love these answers. Yeah, I mean, I yeah, I agree with both of you that it's not about politicizing the review or the article or the story you're doing. It's about just and people say, well, we want to have representation, we want to have inclusion, but to me, when I live in a place like Los Angeles, I'm like, well, it's actually exclusion to not write about these people because they have such a strong presence here, and they, like you said, they're the neighbors, they're part of this story, and that is the powerful part, is just writing about them, telling the readers who they are, and so I think it's amazing that both of you have been doing that from the beginning, you know, or at least found that along the way, right?
Trying.
Trying, yeah.
And so there's now a lot of people tuning into your reviews, and we live in a culture where everyone is sort of, everyone's a reviewer, beyond Yelp, and there's now TikTok, and we have so many people that want to rate things and want a thumbs up, thumbs down, and a number system. But I'm wondering if it's getting lost that the most important thing about food writing is the writing. How do we make readers interested in food writing, and to just the same curiosity that drives you to write, and the writing is excellent, and I have a lot of conversations with people that are always like, oh, this person just wrote a review and I don't agree with it. I go, did you read the story? Because a lot of times they don't read the story, and they realize that the critic was actually pointing out flaws of the restaurant in the story and wasn't praising everything, or might have even panned the restaurant, but they're not reading it, and they're just looking at the straight up, did they like it or not like it, do they recommend it or not recommend it. So how do we get people in an incurious time where it's like, I just went to this place and it's 10 out of 10, and because they were paid. And how do we get people engaged and to get them to understand that writing is the point, and you're telling stories about the restaurant scene that are going to be forever. I mean, people will look back at 2025 and say these were the stories that were relevant, and you're finding that because you have curiosity, you're researching, and you're talking to people, and you're going out to eat. That's what's exciting about dining to me, is not that this was the best place, but that I was there and part of that. So how do we get readers to understand more that, how do we make this curiosity thing sexy for everybody, and that the important thing is the writing?
I love writing, so I love writing and I love reading, and I don't know, if someone is not interested in reading the piece, I hope that the other things that we are doing are kind of getting them to the story to read it, but I actually don't know. I don't have a sense of if that works. But I guess, that's why we're making reels that are kind of, I mean, we're supposed to think of them as a compressed version of the review, but they're not, right? There's so much that the story does, that the review does, that the video cannot. I think people working in video, like people who are video first, who really like have a sense of that form and are working
Yeah.
in that form, they can do things in video that I can't do. And each form kind of has things that only it can do.
Yeah.
And I think that writing is the form I love, and I think writing does things that other forms can't do. And I'm still trying to grasp everything else. But I don't know how to make writing sexy is like a very funny, it's like a hilarious question. I'm reminded of electric literature. I had a couple friends who were working at electric literature, and they had, when they first launched, they had this whole campaign, and I think it was reading is sexy or something, and it was just like sexy people with books.
Oh,
That was
yeah, probably not what we're
that was
talking
the
about here.
campaign. No, absolutely not. But and not what they were just
Yeah,
being
right,
funny
right.
about the. But like the idea of how do you get people to the page is not really. That's I don't know how to do that. I only know how to write. And then I try to do my best and try to invite the reader in and try to do all the things that make them want to stay till the end of the story, and hopefully give them something that they can't get anywhere else that does feel special, like I made it for them.
Yeah.
And I really did. It's not it's if you want like the AI bullet points of the restaurant, if you want photos, if there are a million places to get all these other things. I'm hoping that I can give the reader something special, and that's what I'm trying for every single time. That's the only way I know how to that's the only way I know how to do it. I don't know.
Both of you are doing great at video. I don't know what you're talking about. I love the videos. The and I also do see that all the publications are moving towards this right now, and understanding that the social media is so young. I mean, it's really a pandemic. It was the pandemic that brought out all these TikTok food stars that are big now. And so I feel like it's evolving, and more journalists are leaving mainstream publications for Substack, and because of all kinds of reasons, political and job loss, but it's creating a scenario in which I think the future is that there will be strong journalism on social media that both has the elements of the video and the content, plus the actual your words and your thoughts. The videos you both are doing are entertaining for this audience right here, and I see, like, I'm actually excited about it. I think that's part of it. I mean, I think that's part of how you're going to convey to people why did you give this restaurant this rating, or why did you say that it was, why was it a great restaurant, why is it a restaurant that has promise, that you're doing that with video now. We have a world where people aren't reading as much, and so their view of the critic is just this ratings. It's pure ratings, and they're less interested in the story that you're telling. And the story that you're telling is about dining in this time, which, when we go back and look at stories from 2012, and we're like, oh wow, these restaurants were the places to be at that time. That's what's fun. It's nice to have been at a restaurant when it's in its epoch, it's time. So I'm asking both of you, how do we do that besides the videos that you're doing? How do we get people to understand that this is just storytelling, and the review is a part of that, but there's another aspect to that that's more important, I think.
Yeah, I think that I mean, this is like the magic question for any writer. How do you get someone to read? How do you get someone to keep reading? And I think that there will be some people who come to the reviews. I think most people come to the reviews perhaps just wanting to know, is this a restaurant I could go to? And then hopefully they might be captivated or sometimes enraged by the language and the way the actual writing. I think that actually rage is a unifier as much as as pleasure, and and sometimes they'll see that we're trying to tell a larger story, and they might not like that, or they do like that. It's very interesting to see arguments play out in the comments in that way. For people who maybe just want to clock, oh, it's this rating. I do think one of the things, of course, with the Times is that it's sort of, the ratings are complicated. On the same review, someone will say this reads like a 3-star, and someone else will say it reads like a 1-star when it was a 2-star. So I think part of it is trying to help people understand the system, and it does require reading the review to sort of kind of understand why it's merited this particular rating. And the ratings are quite difficult, and there are lots of nuances in them, even within a category. I do hope the videos will bring more readers in. It's very new to me, so it's hard to know. But at the end of the day, I do think that the thing about the writing, it's the stories you're telling, and it's also the word choice can tell you so much, right? So that you don't have to be declaring an opinion, but by using certain images, and certain words have so much meaning just built right into them. Um, so that's just the hope that you're doing as much showing instead of telling as possible, but that the message is coming through, and maybe hopefully celebrating language as well as food along the way.
No, not at all. Bill, have you seen that the New York Times app now has a watch tab at the bottom?
Oh no, I didn't see that.
It's pretty new. I don't know exactly when it rolled out, but it's pretty new. So, now there's a tab for people who just want to kind of scroll through video, and it includes reported pieces, it includes critics, it includes sort of the whole ecosystem of the Times
Yeah.
within the watch tab, including our reviews sometimes.
So I've heard so many discussions, again in your interviews about the ratings and how to, you know, I think there are a lot of conversations always about like, why did this place get 2 stars and this place? There's always these funny hierarchies that happen with people about what they value. That's an ongoing, I mean, that's time immemorial. All critics have dealt with that. And especially it becomes more complicated as more types of cuisines are being reviewed and types of cooking. And I think you pose that question, Tejal, is like, or in your conversations on the doc, I want to see this doc that you're having the discussions on, and about what constitutes, what should we, give this place 2 stars if they're not doing this, because obviously it was more clear cut when it was all, Italian and French fine dining. But I was very impressed with Bill Addison by, he took this restaurant that I wrote about, Barbacoa Ramirez, and he put it as the ninth best restaurant in Los Angeles. And a lot of people were, like, why, what is that doing up there? That should be lower. It's a taqueria. But in your research, like on this doc, things like this, I think, are a big question for me. Is it when I see someone like the Ramirez family, where they're raising a lamb, they're butchering it, they're breaking it down into all these dishes, they're carefully laying sticks in a pit and having it to have the different cuts and everything at the exact height, and then covering it up and having this really consistent result over years. How is that different? How are you going to convey that to readers? Because I feel like Bill just it was just a blur because it's the 101 best, but like, I understand their process. And when I hear chefs talk about it, well, we did a 24-hour this, and we sous vide this, we did a smoke this in a smoker. I'm like, how is that more intense than what this family's doing? And the guy's doing it himself. His kids don't, they help him lift things, but it's pretty much a process that he will not really pass on just yet. And but it's so intricate, and people don't understand. It's not just throwing meat in a pit. They actually have a system of how they set everything up. So how do we get people to, this place where they realize that that's really valuable, and so is what, Cato is doing and Alinea is doing.
I think that any cuisine and any kind of restaurant can sort of earn any star rating. Do you know what I mean? I don't think
Yeah,
I know that the only 4-star restaurants right now are very, very, expensive fine dining French and
sure.
Japanese restaurants, but I'm hoping that's something that we can um, we can see change, we can see shift. I think that a review is a really good way to kind of show that work and show that labor and explain the value of a technique regardless of what kind of what kind of food it is or where it comes from. It's like, if that work is really brilliant, if there's magic there, um, it's my job to show it and interpret it and kind of explain it to the reader. And I truly believe that, like, any restaurant can get any star rating. There are no rules around that. It just, maybe it looks that way if you look back in time, but there aren't any.
See, that was a game-changing answer. See, you are changing the culture.
I mean, Pete Wells gave 3 stars to, I think that place was, I think it doesn't even have a kitchen, right? Or haven't been there.
Yeah, the lechon.
It's like a trailer
lechon
with
place,
a yeah.
Yes, it's not a
Yeah.
bricks and mortar, it's not even a storefront, and he gave it 3 stars. I mean, we have to go back in time, and I can't remember who it was, but back in the 70s when all of
yeah.
Chinatown got 4 stars, which I always cite as like, that's like one of
Right.
my favorite, like, just go.
Yeah.
It's all going to be great. It doesn't even matter where you go.
And I think, like, this work doesn't happen in, like, one review doesn't do this work. I think it's like slowly, piece by piece, the reviews kind of add up to doing this work. I'm hoping.
Okay. Last question, and this it's going to be a fun one for the real. So when Ligaya, when you come to town, Tejal's been out with me a few times, and I think I I really get nervous and anxious when I have to take writers out. I know that I'm taking them to a good place, but I agonize over it, and I sit there and I go through, like, okay, where are they from? Like, what's their background? Where do they grow up? What kind of foods do they have access to and not have access to? All these crazy things go through my mind. So when you come for the taco tour, just know I'm going to be very, very stressed about it, but you're going to have a great time. So
I am your student.
so I want both of you to tell me the 3 places in both LA and New York that you take writer friends when you want to show off the town. 3 in New York, 3 in LA.
Oh, wow.
Well, I will say, like, the couple of places that come to mind right away, I've lately have been recommending Comal, which I think is really
Yes.
quite special, and I love the food there. I also love the fact that it's in this mercado. It's like very communal. You pay and then you sit down, and then that's where Holbox is. That's where, it's just a great space. You feel like you're really part of the city when you're there, and then the food is also truly delicious. And then I also have been I reviewed it, but I've been sending people to Baby Bistro as well, because I also think it's kind of this, it feels very only, very very particular to LA right now, and it keeps changing. So that's part of what's special about it too. The restaurant as it is 3 weeks right now, it'll be kind of different in a few weeks as ingredients change and as, like, Miles Thompson's
Yeah.
mood changes. And I think that's really exciting as well, to have a place that's really kind of driven by this creative force. Yeah, those are 2 places that come to mind right away.
Okay, you got a third?
Give me a minute.
So this is an interesting question, because you're saying to take food writers, and all the food writers I know have been to everywhere in New York. So it's
Well, I'm coming to town. I'm coming to New York, and you want we got our, like, our solid hits that either that we're excited about because we just wrote about them, or like something that really shows the city that people would probably not end up there if they, you know what I mean?
Yeah, this is so interesting, because usually I just tell friends where to go, and I get a sense. I really like to get a sense of who the person is, because I feel like
Yeah.
it's so specific for different people, because there's so many places in the city I could go to. And there are other places that I've written about most recently, and I'm super excited about. Like, I have a review coming out tomorrow, and I guess since this podcast will not come out until after the review comes out, I can say it's actually a place in Jersey City. I think it's amazing. It's a Bangladeshi hole in the wall, really, but on Friday and Saturday nights, which are the only nights it's open, it serves this $95 a person dinner that's supposed to be 8 courses. It feels like a million courses. It's just more food than you can ever eat in this completely unfussy setting.
Yeah.
And it's So I would say that's amazing. It's also very recent. It's like feels very new. There's also this
Yeah.
amazing kaiseki place that I haven't written about yet, so I can't tell you what it is, but I would tell people to go there too. But if
Go
I'm just
there.
saying, go to the place that I can't name. And
Well, they can go
but I would
after
say
you write the article.
they can. But I would also say that places, if I'm just having friends come to town, so I'm not a believer in like this whole idea of the best. I'm not going to send people to the best places.
The best
I'm just
is
going to
stupid.
send them, right, just places that feel very New York. So I feel like Golden Diner feels very New York to me. Thai Diner feels very New York, that these are places that have a lot of energy. They're kind of cramped, crowded. They're full of life. The food is interesting. It's fun to eat. It's just like those are really fun places to go that show you different parts of New York, put you in interesting parts of town. But I could go on and on and on.
I bet.
Like I feel like so those are, I'm just throwing a few of those out there. Go to Jersey City to the Bangladeshi spot, the unnamed kaiseki place, and Golden Diner, Thai Diner. It's all going to be great.
That's perfect. And that appeals to me as a food writer who really, when I'm in New York, I go to Washington Heights for Dominican food, and I go to Jackson Heights for Colombian and Ecuadorian. And so I don't know the Bangladeshi spots. And so that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Fantastic.
And Tejal, you got one more for us?
If someone's from out of town, I do like sending them to like an old LA spot, which could be a number of places depending on what their thing is. Like someplace like maybe Musos or maybe Cielito Lindo, or someplace where, because especially people who aren't from LA, who haven't spent time here, don't have a sense of like the history of the city. And there are so many restaurants that help you understand LA has a lot of history, and so Muso's is special to me, but I also I do love going and standing in line at Cielito Lindo. If I don't know if it's open right now. Is it?
It is.
Yeah, okay.
Can I just add, by the way, I realized I didn't say the name of the Bangladeshi spot. It's Korai Kitchen.
Okay. Listeners, please read Ligaya Mishan and Tejal Rao. Both of them are chief restaurant critics at New York Times. Read their reviews. I mean, read them. And also watch their wonderful social media videos. And they're fun and they're entertaining and they're also journalistic at the same time. That is sexy. Journalism, words. We like that too. And
we love words.
Thank you so much for coming on. And believe me, I'm like, when I knew this was going to happen and we finally got this date, I was so excited. I do see Tejal, but it's still exciting to have this conversation with the two of you. So thank you for being on.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's been so fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Takiando podcast this week. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode. And please leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcasts.